all-inclusive current affairs for prelims 2021 Polity Class 3. This video is in English. हिंदी वीडियो भी हमारे YouTube चैनल पर अवेलेबल है. Fifth schedule versus sixth schedule. See, there are many tribes in India who have their different style of living. To ensure their proper administration, some concessions needs to be given. For example, suppose in the state of Rajasthan, there is some area where some tribes are living, right? So for their administrative purposes, we have created a scheduled area. Okay, we have created this area as a scheduled area. Now there are some tribes in Northeast India. Okay, there are some tribes in Northeast India where, first of all, the number of tribes are quite large and their assimilation with the mainstream Indian society is extremely less. So the amount of autonomous administrative independence that needs to be given is more. Okay, their independence requirement, their autonomous requirement is more, so they are included in sixth schedule. So mainly fifth schedule and sixth schedule, both are from 4 scheduled tribes. Both are for the tribes, but sixth schedule gives more independence to those tribes. Okay. Also there are like it is a case, it could be the case, suppose in Rajasthan there is no particular area with high population of scheduled tribes, so maybe we don't make a scheduled area, but there would be scheduled tribes distributed all over Rajasthan. Okay, so for them also we can include this state under the fifth schedule. So right now fifth schedule is in application in 10 states. In these 10 states, fifth schedule areas are presently there. Although it can be declared for any state in India. For any state in India, suppose for UP, tomorrow government can declare a particular area as a scheduled area. Government can do so, but presently only 10 states have scheduled areas. Under the sixth schedule, areas can be declared only for these 4 states: Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura, Mizoram. Okay, these 4: Assam, Meghalaya, Tripura and Mizoram. Now who can change the boundary of a fifth schedule area? It is a president. For sixth schedule, it is a governor. Right now, if parliament has made a law and you want that the law should not apply to a particular scheduled area or to some scheduled tribes, right? So who can declare so? The governor. Okay, either the governor can say that such and such law of parliament won't be applied, or it will apply with such and such modifications. Governor is a competent authority. Same thing for state laws. In the case of sixth schedule, it is always again the governor, except in a special case where there is a central law and it is for these 3 states. Okay, so for prelims, the only thing you have to remember is that it's always the governor, except for this particular case, central laws for these 3 states. Right? Does PESA apply to these fifth schedule areas? Yes, but PESA does not apply to sixth schedule areas. What is PESA? We will study it shortly. Fifth schedule areas, the states which have a fifth schedule area, there is Tribes Advisory Council to advise the government that what steps should be taken for benefit of scheduled tribes in our state. Right? Suppose Rajasthan has a scheduled area, so at state level there will be an advisory council which will have 20 members, 15 of which should be the scheduled tribes MLAs. So new elections are not there. The already elected MLAs, scheduled tribe MLAs, they are included in this advisory council. However, in sixth schedule areas, that is in these, okay, we need to give them more autonomy. Therefore, there is an entirely new autonomous district council. Elections are held. This district council has 30 members. Out of these 30, election is held for 26 members. Rest 4 are nominated by the governor. Right? There is also a concept of inner line permit. Now if you as an Indian citizen, you live in suppose UP and you want to visit Arunachal, so you will need a permit to visit Arunachal. We are not talking about settling there or buying land there. We are talking about even for tourism purpose. To enter Arunachal, you need to get a permit. Okay, that permit is called as inner line permit. Who issues this? The central government. No, central government does not issue it. It is the concerned state government that issues ILP. It is applicable in 4 states: Arunachal, Nagaland, Manipur, Mizoram. Now, how do you remember these things? It's quite simple. We are talking about the inner line permit. So, inner line is, think of this boundary, think of the easternmost boundary of India. Which are the states on the easternmost boundary? It is Arunachal, Nagaland, Manipur, Mizoram. So, this will be ILP. And which are in 6th schedule? All states of northeast, these states of northeast except ILP, but Mizoram is in both. Okay, Mizoram is in 6th schedule as well as ILP. So Mizoram is common, otherwise the remaining states are in 6th schedule. And 5th schedule, Himachal is important because it is in the north region and other all are contiguous. Okay, this region. So just remember this. Now, what is the genesis of ILP? In 1873, Britishers brought an act, Bengal Eastern Frontier Regulation Act 1873. The main purpose was to restrict the entry of Indians in certain areas because these areas were important to the British commercial interest. So Britishers said that we don't want any competition from the local Indians, therefore Indians will need our permission to enter these areas. After independence, we modified this. We said yes, Indians will need permission to enter these areas, but our aim is that the tribals should be protected. Their culture, their tradition should not get disturbed. Right? Now, since Indian citizens need permission, ILP, to enter these areas, foreigners also need permission. But the document that is required by foreigners is called as Protected Area Permit. In Manipur, out of these 4 states, Nagaland, Manipur, Mizoram and Arunachal. In Manipur, ILP was recently introduced. Initially, it was only in Arunachal, Arunachal, Nagaland and Mizoram. So in Manipur, it was introduced from 1st January 2020. And in Meghalaya also there is a law. In Meghalaya, there is a law, Meghalaya Resident Safety and Security Act 2016. So this is Meghalaya. Meghalaya has a law after 2019 amendment. It works just like ILP, but it is not ILP. So if UPSC asks you a question that in which states is ILP applicable, so ILP is applicable only in these 4 states. But if it asks you in which states you need permission to visit the state, in that case you have to include Meghalaya as well. Now we said that in 6th schedule, quite a lot of autonomy is given to the district council. So what kind of autonomy are we talking about? The autonomy is in all spheres of legislation, judiciary and executive. For example, ADCs, autonomous district councils under 6th, not 5th, under 6th schedule can make laws for land, forest, marriage, etc. They also have judicial powers, that is, they can create courts to settle disputes. They also have executive or administrative powers, like to manage and create schools, health centers, market road, etc. And where will money come from? To collect the money, they can impose taxes on the locals, and they also get grants from the Consolidated Fund of India. Now, what is this PESA? See, when we brought in 1992, we gave constitutional status to panchayats through introducing the Part 9 in the Constitution. But this Part 9 did not automatically extend it to scheduled areas. Okay, so suppose this is a state. In a particular state, there is a scheduled area. So this panchayat's provision in the Constitution applied to all the area, but not to this scheduled area. Okay. However, the Constitution empowers the Parliament that if Parliament wants, it can extend these panchayat provisions to these areas, to this scheduled area also. Hence, in 1996, Parliament enacted this Act, PESA Act, and extended the provisions of Part 9 to these scheduled areas as well. The name of this act is Panchayats, extension to scheduled areas. Please mind it, we are talking about scheduled areas. That is about the 5th schedule, not the 6th schedule. Why did the parliament did not extend these panchayat provisions to the 6th schedule? Because 6th schedule areas already have a lot of autonomy. Okay, if you go and apply the panchayat provisions here, their powers will actually reduce, not increase. Right? Now, what is the purpose of PESA Act? Simple. Whatever was the purpose of Panchayats Act, same is the purpose of PESA Act. Right? To provide the self-rule, to provide participatory democracy. We the people elect our MP, who in Lok Sabha makes the laws. Is that participatory democracy? No, that is representative democracy, because our representative makes the laws. But in participatory democracy, it is a common man himself, he directly gets involved in decision making. And the best tool for participatory democracy in India is Gram Sabha. Okay. Now, what are the other objectives? Very general objectives of PESA, like protect the tribal customs, preventing higher panchayats from assuming power of lower panchayat. Right? When you empower the lower panchayats, they can take decisions on their own. Now, what is the role of Gram Sabha under PESA? Role of Gram Sabha. Gram Sabha consists of all the voters of that area. Okay, all the common people who are eligible to vote are part of Gram Sabha. So its role is to protect the culture, resolve the disputes through customary process, okay, not necessarily through the law of court, to preserve the community resources. There are community resources like rivers, lakes, small forest patches. Government has a scheme for poverty alleviation. Who will benefit from it? To identify the beneficiaries, it is the local people, not the Sarkari Babu. It is the local people who are the best judge that who among us should be a beneficiary of this poverty alleviation program. Okay, Gram Sabha approves the development projects. When government gives funds to panchayat to do some work, whether panchayat has properly used that money or not, who certifies that? It is a Gram Sabha. Okay, then if you want to apply for a mining lease for some minor mineral, not major mineral, okay, for some minor mineral, then that also, for that you need Gram Sabha's permission. Now let us see what type of question UPSC asks from 5th and 6th schedule. In 2012, there was a question: from which of the following provisions have a impact on the education, have some provision related to education? 5th schedule has some provision for education? Yes. 6th schedule? Yes. See, these organizations or committees or councils have been given some power, be it advisory or be it binding or whatever power, for the benefit of local people. Health, education, these are things which local are best, they're in the best position to see these things, right? So 5th and 6th schedule have some provision for education. In DPSP there is a provision for education. Rural and urban local bodies like municipality has some runs some schools for primary students especially, right? Then there is 7th schedule, which has central state list, right? In 2019 there was a question that there has been a transfer of tribal land for mining. Who can declare it null and void? Under which provision? Obviously the 5th schedule, not the other schedules. Okay. In 2015, what is the purpose for 5th and 6th schedule? To protect the interest of scheduled tribe. PESA Act. Which of these were not the objective of PESA Act? To create autonomous region. See, PESA Act is for scheduled area or 5th schedule, but autonomous region is for the 6th schedule. Okay. 2012 question: PESA Act, role of Gram Sabha. So Gram Sabha has a power to prevent alienation of land, correct? Gram Sabha has ownership of minor forest produce. So suppose in a jungle there is a tree and you cut the tree. Suppose you are going to cut the tree. So when you cut the tree, you get the timber. Okay, the timber obtained in such a way is a major forest produce. However, there are many things from the forest that you get without cutting the tree. For example, the leaves, branches, any grass, shrubs, all those things you get from the forest without cutting the tree. Such things are called as minor forest produce. So Gram Sabha has a ownership. There is a collective ownership of the minor forest produce. Okay, and recommendation of Gram Sabha is required for granting license for any mineral in scheduled area. No, not any mineral. Gram Sabha's permission is required for minor minerals. Okay, for minor minerals only, not for any mineral. So 1 and 2 are correct. 2008 question. Which schedule for Indian Constitution is for scheduled areas? It is the 5th schedule. Arunachal Assembly resolves to change state's constitutional status. Okay, the Home Minister there tabled a bill, tabled a motion resolution that Arunachal should get greater autonomy. Right. So for prelims, so under the 6th schedule, okay, it should get more autonomy under the 6th schedule. So under 6th schedule, Arunachal is presently not there. So inspired by this news, UPSC can ask about 5th and 6th schedule, which I've already discussed. The special provision for some states under Article 371 to 370J, that is part 21 of the Constitution. Here the news is about changing the constitutional status of Arunachal. So what has been the earlier constitutional status of Arunachal? Earlier it was NEFA as a part of Assam, then it became UT, Union Territory, and now it's a state. Okay, about inner line permit we have already studied, and about the borders of Northeast India. Please see this prelims 2005 question. Statement 1 tells that articles 371A to 371I are for which states? Now the name of states is given here. Okay, if you want to learn the name of states, it's quite easy. Learn it from the map. When you see the map of India, okay, these are the, okay, so ignore this Jammu Kashmir because it was from Article 370. This you already know, right? This everyone knows. Now you just need to focus on this area. Okay, so it's Gujarat, Maharashtra, Goa, Karnataka, Telangana, and Andhra. Right? And when you focus on the northeast, there you will say all states except Meghalaya and Tripura. Fine. I'm sorry, I marked this wrong. Okay, so there is no mention of Meghalaya and Tripura. This is Tripura. Okay, this is actually Mizoram. I will correct this in the PDF. Okay, just remember Meghalaya and Tripura are not mentioned here. Others are there. Mizoram is there. Okay, I'll do the correction later on. And what was the second statement? It was that both India and US have dual polity. Dual polity means there is a central government and there is a separate state government. Yes, but single citizenship, India has single citizenship, not US. So second statement is wrong. Third, a naturalized citizen of India can never be deprived of his citizenship. This is wrong. Okay, so in Lakshmikant you have studied there are some ways in which we can give citizenship, and there are some ways in which we can take citizenship. Right? There is nothing like if you're a natural citizen then citizenship cannot be taken. Of course it can be taken away. The borders of Northeast. Here I think the important thing is UPSC can ask, it can give a list of states and say that which of these states share a boundary with Bangladesh. So always see these things through the map. This is Bangladesh. The states bordering Bangladesh are West Bengal, Assam from here, Meghalaya, then again Assam, Tripura, and Mizoram. Fine. Now what about Myanmar border? It is those ILP states. With Myanmar we have Arunachal, Nagaland, Manipur, Mizoram. Arunachal, Nagaland, Manipur, Mizoram. With Bhutan we have Sikkim, Arunachal, West Bengal, Assam. Okay, Sikkim is also there because you should know there was some Doklam issue with China, right? It was at this tri-junction. With China, two states, Sikkim and Arunachal. Now please notice that Assam shares a border with all these northeast states. See Arunachal here, Nagaland, Manipur, Mizoram, Tripura, Meghalaya. Okay, so if you want to visit any of these states from West Bengal, you have to first visit Assam. Once you enter Assam, you can directly go to any of these states. Look at this previous year question of 2017. If you travel by road from Kohima to Kottayam, what is the minimum number of states that you need to travel? Answer is 7. How? Look. Kottayam, you are in Kerala, okay, and you have to go to Kohima, right? So in whichever state of northeast you need to go, you need to first enter Assam, and you will enter Assam from West Bengal. So from Kerala you need to go to West Bengal. The shortest route here is Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Andhra, Odisha, West Bengal. From West Bengal you enter Assam, and from Assam you can go to any state, right? So answer is 7. Arunachal Pradesh. In 1914, from some tribal areas of Assam, Britishers created a territory called as Northeast Frontier Tract. After independence, it was administered by Ministry of External Affairs along with the Governor of Assam. Okay, constitutionally NEFT was part of Assam. Okay, in 1954 we named it as NEFA, Northeast Frontier Agency. In 1965 its administrative responsibility was transferred from External Affairs Ministry to Home Affairs Ministry. In 1971-72 when the Northeast was being reorganized, Arunachal Pradesh, this NEFA became Arunachal Pradesh, and it became Arunachal as a union territory. Okay, it is only in 1987 that this union territory became a full-fledged state. Fine. So remember that Arunachal Pradesh, the capital is Itanagar. It is the largest state in Northeast. It is not Assam. Assam is not the largest state in Northeast. It is Arunachal Pradesh. Okay. Now what about the borders of Arunachal? Arunachal shares borders with Assam and Nagaland. Okay, Arunachal shares border with Assam and with Nagaland, small border here. It also shares border with China, Myanmar and Bhutan. So it has a long border with China, okay, then a border with Myanmar and a small border with Bhutan as well. After every 2-3 years, UPSC in some form asks question on Arunachal Pradesh. Let us look at some of those questions. In 2018 it asked, where is Pakkui or Pakke Wildlife Sanctuary? It's in Arunachal. 2015 question. There is a big national park in India in which the climate is tropical, like there is an equator, right? This is Earth. At equator we have here tropical climate, then we have subtropical climate, then temperate, and then Arctic. All these type of climate are present in one single national park. Which is that national park? That is Namdapha National Park in Arunachal Pradesh. Okay, basically the elevation varies. So here you have quite rain and equatorial type of forest, tropical climate basically. Then the altitude increases, and here you also have the Arctic type of climate. Fine. So this Namdapha National Park is in Arunachal. 2015. Which of the above states have tropical wet evergreen forest? Himachal does not have tropical wet evergreen forest. Himachal has coniferous forest, right? So answer would be Arunachal and Mizoram, basically the northeast. 2015 question. Easternmost state of India, it is Arunachal. Okay, easternmost state is Arunachal. It is not Nagaland or Manipur. 2012 question. A state is being described here, which is the correct description. Okay, a state is located on the same latitude which passes through northern Rajasthan. So this is northern Rajasthan. Now which latitude? So latitude like this. So it passes through Arunachal. Okay, same latitude as northern Rajasthan. Then 80% of its area is forest, and 12% of those forests are protected area. Protected area means either 12% of its forest area is national park or wildlife sanctuary, such things. Okay, it's a protected area. 2014 question. So that state is Arunachal. 2014 question. Which of these rivers flow through Arunachal Pradesh? Options are Barak, Lohit, Subansari. Look at this map. Here is Arunachal. Okay. Now here in Arunachal, this is Brahmaputra. Okay, it is coming from here, China. Brahmaputra is this. Now this is Lohit. Okay, this is Lohit river, and here is Subansari. Where is Barak? This is Barak. Barak is in through Assam, not through Arunachal. So Barak is wrong. Lohit and Subansari are correct. 2007 question. State with the lowest population density. It's Arunachal Pradesh. So if you're standing here, you move 1 kilometer in this direction and 1 kilometer in this direction. Now this whole area is 1 square kilometer. If you're in Ladakh, you will find just 3 people in such a big area. In Arunachal, you will be able to find 17 people in such huge area. So Arunachal has lowest population density in India among the states. 2004 question. Incorrect statement was asked among these. You could have solved this question simply by knowing that India's largest Buddhist monastery is in Arunachal. Its name is Tawang. Tawang Buddhist Monastery of Arunachal is not only India's largest but also second largest in the world after a monastery in Tibet. 2007 question. You have to chronologically tell when the following states became full state in India. So Nagaland became a full state in 1963. Haryana in 1966. We studied about this in the first polity class from state reorganization. Haryana was carved out of Punjab. Sikkim was earlier a protectorate of India. Then it became an associate state. And finally in 1975, Sikkim became a full state. Arunachal, earlier NEFT, then NEFA. Then in 1972 it became UT, and in 87 it became state. Alright, so this is the correct chronology. Article 370. It gave special status to Jammu and Kashmir, and it was a temporary article in the Indian Constitution. See, when Britishers left India, they did not divide India into two parts, Pakistan and India. They rather divided this region into 565 different countries. Okay, each of these independent country or princely state had the right to remain independent. Jammu Kashmir decided to remain independent. Who will decide whether a princely state will remain independent or not, or which country it will join? It was a right of the ruler. The ruler of Jammu Kashmir was Maharaja Hari Singh. Maharaja Hari Singh, he decided that Jammu Kashmir will neither join Pakistan nor join India. It will remain independent. Fine. However, Pakistan is a different country. Jammu Kashmir is a different country. India is a different country. Now this Pakistan attacked Jammu and Kashmir, which is an entirely different country, right? So country A attacks country B. Country B asks India for help. India said, how can we protect you? You're not part of us. So Jammu Kashmir said, fine. The Maharaja Hari Singh said, fine. I will sign instrument of accession and Jammu Kashmir will become part of India. Right? So on 26th October 1947, Jammu Kashmir's Raja Hari Singh signed instrument of accession and Jammu Kashmir acceded to India. In that instrument of accession, it ceded 3 subjects to India: defense, external affairs and communication. Right? Now in 2019, Government of India abrogated Article 370. So we should know a brief history of Article 370, the reason behind its inception, how it was gradually eroded, and finally how it was abrogated. So this I have told you what happened in 1947. In 1948, 1st January, India approached United Nations. In April 1948, United Nations Resolution 47. So in prelims question can come, what is United Nations Resolution 47 related to? So it is related to Kashmir, right? How will you remember? 1947, 47, right? This resolution said that there should be a ceasefire, both countries should stop fighting, Pakistan should withdraw from Jammu Kashmir, but India should only reduce its army. Why? Because this is Jammu Kashmir, suppose. So Jammu Kashmir was a country which formally, legally ceded to India. So India has a right to deploy its armed forces here, because defense was a matter written in the instrument of accession. So we have the right to have our army here, but Pakistan has absolutely no right. So Pakistan must withdraw from Jammu Kashmir. That is what this resolution said. India should only reduce its army here, and then once these conditions are met, then a plebiscite will happen. People of Jammu Kashmir will be asked to choose between India and Pakistan, whatever, or if they want to remain independent, right? But this condition of Pakistan withdrawing from Jammu Kashmir was never met. Pakistan never withdrew, hence a plebiscite never happened. In 1951, October, people of Jammu Kashmir elected their constituent assembly to create a separate constitution for Jammu Kashmir. Okay, in October 1951, the assembly met for the first time, and in 1956, November 17, it adopted the constitution of Jammu Kashmir, but it came into force next year on January 26th. Okay, the story is similar to what happened with Indian constitution, right? It came into force on 26th January. Now the interesting thing is that first of all, Britishers gave the power to accede to a country to the ruler. So Maharaja Hari Singh signed instrument of accession. Hence Jammu Kashmir became part of India. Also later on, when people elected Constituent Assembly, that Constituent Assembly clearly wrote in Jammu Kashmir's constitution that Jammu Kashmir is integral part of India, right? So India has 100% genuine claims to say that Jammu Kashmir is integral part of India. Fine, because it is the people of Jammu Kashmir which said so, right? Now an interesting story started then. See, Jammu Kashmir ceded only three things: defense, external affairs, and communication. But we all know that today, even before abrogation of 370, India had control on many more things. How did we extend our control? The reason was 1954 presidential order. See, this is the Indian constitution. Okay, this is Indian constitution. How do you amend Indian constitution? By having 2/3 majority in parliament. However, in 1954, the President of India amended Indian constitution without parliament's approval. Article 35A, a new article was inserted in Indian constitution without the proper route. Why? So that it can be struck down. See, what happened was, during this time, 1951 to 1956, when this Constituent Assembly was preparing the constitution of Jammu Kashmir, we obviously wanted that the constitution should be prepared according to how we wanted to be prepared, right? So we wanted to take the Constituent Assembly into our confidence. Hence, the President of India inserted Article 35A, which gave the right to the Jammu Kashmir government to decide who will be a permanent resident of Jammu Kashmir. By such presidential orders, the Constituent Assembly was taken into confidence that India will never encroach upon your rights. You want to remain independent? You will remain independent. We will control only those three matters, right? However, this method was extremely wrong, right? It is not allowed. How can you amend Indian constitution like this? But we amended it like this because so that these special concessions that we are giving to them, we can take away these concessions anytime by simply saying sorry. we did a mistake by amending our constitution like this. Our constitution does not allow to be amended in this such a way. In fact, it was a current affair also. In 2017, some people filed a case in Supreme Court that 35A was wrongly inserted, hence it should be struck down. The interesting thing is that the Modi government said to the Supreme Court, कि sir, please don't remove Article 35A. Publicly, every political party says that 35A should be removed. During that time, political parties used to say, but in Supreme Court, Government of India said 35A should not be removed. Please hold on. Please keep the case pending. Why did the government say? There was a very, very strong reason behind this. See, when we brought this presidential order to pacify the Constituent Assembly, after that, President did not stop. He subsequently brought many more such presidential orders to extend India's control on Jammu Kashmir. So if you go by this logic that two-third majority or the proper procedure of two-third majority in parliament was not followed, hence it should be removed, 35A should be removed. Fine, 35A will be removed, but we will also lose the subsequent presidential orders which enabled us to extend our control on Jammu Kashmir, which will be a disaster situation. By saying that it was wrong, but the 35A was wrong, by saying this, the situation will go back to 1950, the status when Jammu Kashmir we had only control over three things, right? So therefore this removal of 35A was not done. In 1963, okay, see what these presidential orders were doing. These presidential orders were in effect nullifying Article 370, right? Hence, in 1963, November 27, the Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, made a statement in Lok Sabha that, as the Home Minister has rightly said, Article 370 has been eroded. This is the Prime Minister of India speaking in the Lok Sabha on the floor of the House. This process of gradual erosion of 370 is going on and it will continue. We have eroded 370 and we will erode it further, right? Through these presidential orders, through this 35A kind of things. But some people there, when all these things were being done, some people in Jammu Kashmir understood what India is doing. One among those was the Prime Minister of Jammu Kashmir, because Jammu Kashmir was still an independent country. Right, so the Prime Minister of Jammu Kashmir was Sheikh Abdullah. Sheikh Abdullah was also a good friend of Nehru, but Sheikh Abdullah, the Prime Minister of Jammu Kashmir, understood what was going on. He protested, and to make him quiet, Nehru put Sheikh Abdullah in jail for many years. Right, in the year 2000, when by the time many people understood what actually happened, Jammu Kashmir Assembly passed a resolution that Jammu Kashmir's pre-1953 status should be restored. Why 1953? Because presidential orders started coming from 1954. So they said that our status what was as on 1953, that should be restored. But the Union Cabinet headed by Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee rejected this demand. 2019 August 5, Article 370 was abrogated. Abrogated means that Article 370 still exists, but it is inoperative. Okay, this is the Constitution of India. Constitution has many articles. Now what you can do is you can add an article or you can remove an article. Article 370 was not removed from the Constitution. Article 370 still exists in the Constitution, but we have abrogated, that is, it is inoperative. It is like a dead body. Okay, it is like a dead body, it is lying there, but it is not operating there. Okay, it is not operational. On October 31st, 2019, that is the birthday of the man who united India, we divided Jammu Kashmir into two parts. We are talking about Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. Now this is interesting thing which is not directly relevant for prelims, but very interesting. See, the instrument of accession that Jammu Kashmir signed with India had only three matters, right? Truth is that when India signed instrument of accession with other princely states, that also gave India only three matters, right? So when we signed instrument accession with Jammu Kashmir, We got only these three matters. When we signed instrument of accession with some other state, princely state, then also we got only three matters. Then how did Jammu Kashmir get such a special status? The reason is this, that when we signed instrument of accession, we assured the states that your independence will be maintained. You will remain independent. We just want control of three matters. Fine. To assure this, the states ministry in the union government that time. Who was the states minister? Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel was the home minister as well as the states minister. States ministry framed a model constitution. For whom? For India? No. For the princely states. Just like USA, okay, we said that there will be a central government with a union constitution. There will be many state governments, each of them having their separate state constitution. And this model constitution, which all states will adopt with minor modifications, that model constitution was framed by the states ministry. However, on 19th May 1949, states agreed that we don't want separate constitutions. We will work under Indian constitution itself. Fine. So therefore, no state in India got their separate constitution. India has only one constitution, and that constitution applies to all the states. However, it is that we are talking about 1949. Okay, so there had been just 6 or 7 months of signing instrument of accession with Jammu Kashmir. Jammu Kashmir, what did they want? They wanted to remain independent. So the representative of Jammu Kashmir who was present at this meeting, at this particular meeting on this date, the Jammu Kashmir representative said, "Sir, we always wanted to remain independent. We made it clear from day one to you that we did not want to join India, but since Pakistan attacked us, we wanted your help. In exchange of that help, we gave you three things. Please honor your agreement. Okay, restrict your power only to these three things. Other things will remain ours only." Patel said, okay, that like a gentleman agreement, we agree, we stick to our agreement, right? Therefore, Jammu Kashmir went ahead to make its separate constitution, but none other state made its separate constitution, right? So therefore, when you in the parliament wants to make a law for union list subject or concurrent list subject, it can make a law for any state in India, but not for Jammu Kashmir. For Jammu Kashmir, it wanted concurrence of state government. That was written in Article 370. But now it has been abrogated. So now Indian government can make any union or concurrent list law for Jammu Kashmir as well. In prelims, UPSC can ask, what are the implications of abrogation of Article 370? See, the simple logic is that with this abrogation, the entire Indian constitution is applicable to Jammu Kashmir. So obviously, any option that UPSC says, you simply see whether it is applicable to any Indian state or not, and say that yes, if it applies to any Indian state, it applies to Jammu Kashmir as well. Simple. Fine. Also, there was this Official Language Act. So initially, Jammu Kashmir had English and Urdu as their official language. With this 2020 Act, 3 more official languages have been added to Jammu Kashmir. Those are Kashmiri, Dogri and Hindi. Regarding the purchase of land in Jammu Kashmir, now we all know this, that outsiders were not allowed to purchase land in Jammu Kashmir. Now outsiders are allowed. However, was Jammu Kashmir the only state with such a restriction? No. Even today, there are many states like Himachal Pradesh, Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh and many other states which have some kind of restriction on outsiders buying land in that state. Now the question is, how did the government remove Article 370? Did Indian Constitution have any provision telling us that in future how we will remove this? Because Constitution clearly says that Article 370 is a temporary status. It's a temporary article. If it is a temporary provision, then it has to be removed. What process did the Constitution say to remove Article 370? To remove Article 370, the process is given in Article 373. Article 373 says that the Constituent Assembly of Jammu Kashmir, if it recommends to President of India that, sir, please remove Article 370, then it will be removed. What is the Constituent Assembly of Jammu Kashmir? That was made in 1951 and finished work in 1956. ठीक है, that Constituent Assembly was supposed to say to the President of India, but it did not say. So today if we want to remove it, what is the correct procedure? There will be elections in Jammu Kashmir. Through those elections, not a state assembly but a constituent assembly will be formed. That constituent assembly will say to the president and Article 370 will be removed. But government did not follow this process. Government followed a very innovative process. See, the crux is the real problem here is the constituent assembly, na? That what is the constituent assembly? So government in effect, Indian government in effect said that constituent assembly means the Parliament of India. On what basis did Indian government say that Jammu Kashmir Constituent Assembly means Parliament of India? Here is the way. Okay, it's quite interesting. It was a historical event, so you should be knowing this. You are going to be civil servant in India. Constitution said that which part of Indian Constitution will apply to Jammu Kashmir. This the Jammu Kashmir state government will decide. Fine. Jammu Kashmir state government will tell to the president that, sir, Indian Constitution ke these provisions we want it should apply to Jammu Kashmir also. है ना? That was the role of Jammu Kashmir state government. But since there was a president's rule in Jammu Kashmir, we said, the Indian government said, that the work of state government is to be done by the governor. So this work of recommending which part of Indian Constitution should apply to Jammu Kashmir, this work was done by governor. Governor said to president, dear president sir, I urge you that the whole of Indian Constitution, not which article, the whole of Indian Constitution should apply to Jammu Kashmir. Okay, so president issued this order which said that the entire Indian Constitution applies to Jammu Kashmir. Okay, we did not need any amendment to any constitution or anything. Simply governor said to president and president said fine, whole of Indian Constitution applies to Jammu Kashmir. In this Constitution Order 2019, President of India also said one important thing, that is, in Article 373, wherever the word Constituent Assembly is used, that word should mean the State Assembly. Okay, President said, हमारे in our Constitution, wherever in this particular Article 373 Constituent Assembly word is used, it should mean State Assembly. Okay, Constituent Assembly was equated to State Assembly. Now, since there is President rule, suppose in Uttar Pradesh, today there is President rule, suppose. Now, State Assembly of Uttar Pradesh is not functional, obviously, since there is President's rule. So, who will make laws for UP? It is the Parliament of India. This is applicable for Indian states. But now, since with this presidential order, since already all constitutional provisions are applicable to Jammu Kashmir, so this provision is also applicable. Hence, Constituent Assembly was equated to State Assembly and State Assembly was equated to Parliament of India. Now, Jammu Kashmir's Constituent Assembly had to say that 370 should not apply. That work was done by Parliament of India. So Parliament of India recommended to the President of India that, sir, please remove Article 370, and hence Article 370 was removed, or you can say abrogated. Abrogated is the correct word. Simple. Then in October, okay, Jammu Kashmir was divided into two parts through this act, Jammu Kashmir Reorganization Act 2019. Jammu Kashmir and Ladakh both are UT, but Jammu Kashmir will have a legislature, Ladakh will not have a legislature. Interstate Council. The relevant article is 263. Most students confuse between 262 and 263. Always remember, both of them are for interstate dispute, but the most important thing for life is water. Water is essential for life. So first we will talk about water disputes, that is 262. Then we will talk about other disputes, right? So remember like this, 262 water, other disputes later on in 263. So in Interstate Council, it was constituted by the President of India by an order in 1990. Sarkaria Commission recommended that, sir, in Indian Constitution there is an Article 263 which empowers you to constitute this council. So President of India constituted this council in 1990. Okay, so it is a constitutional body, but it is not a permanent constitutional body. Think of Election Commission of India. Election Commission of India is a permanent body. You don't say that next month we have to conduct elections, so president institutes a election commission which conducts the election, and after election it is dissolved and reconstituted for next election. No such thing happens now. It's a permanent body. But interstate council is not a permanent body. Okay, president formed this in 1990. Fine. What is its work? Its work is to improve intergovernmental coordination, dialogue, etc. For prelims, most important thing is who all are part of this council. From the central government, it is the Prime Minister who also acts as a chairperson. There are 6 union cabinet ministers, including the Home Minister. From the states, states are represented by their chief ministers. So the states are represented by their chief minister. If there is president's rule in any state, then in that case the governor will represent the state. Okay. Then there are some union territories. Some union territories like Delhi and Puducherry have CM. The CM will be present here, or other UTs from their administrator will be there, right? So all states and UTs have some representation. Suppose there is any legal controversy, legal dispute between two governments, two state government, or between center and state. This council can discuss that legal controversy and give its opinion, but that opinion, that decision is advisory. It is not bounding. It is not binding. Okay, so there is state 1, state 2, there is some dispute, interstate council says that state 1 is correct and 2 is wrong, then it is not necessary that they follow this order. Okay, it is because it is only advisory. However, in what way does the constitution say that intergovernmental disputes will be solved? It is through Article 131. Article 131 empowers Supreme Court to solve intergovernmental disputes. So for intergovernmental dispute, the decision of Supreme Court is binding, but the decision of interstate council is not binding. The Secretariat of the Council was established in 1991. It is headed by a secretary to the central government. Since 2011, this Secretariat is also functioning as a secretariat for the zonal councils. Interstate Council has a standing committee since 1996, which is headed by the Chief Minister. Sorry, it is not headed, it is headed by the standing committee is headed by the Home Minister. Okay, there are also some 5 union cabinet ministers and some 9 CMs. See, what is important for prelims is simply that it is a union home minister which heads the standing committee. Recommendations are not binding. Okay, and the members of the interstate council. Simple. What is also important for prelims is a comparison between ISC 5 zonal councils and the Northeast Council. You have to remember ISC is a constitutional body under Article 263. Zonal councils are statutory bodies. When states were reorganized in 1956, the same act also formed zonal councils for regional cooperation. When Northeast was reorganized in 1971, then this act created the Northeast Council. Fine, these two are statutory, this is constitutional. Chairman, ISC chairman is PM. Zonal councils and Northeast Council, the chairman is Union Home Minister. In zonal councils, the vice chairman is chief minister of the states by rotation. Every year they change the chief minister. For Northeast Council, the vice chairman is Minister of State in Union Ministry of Development of Northeast Region. In prelims 2013 and 1995, what UPSC was testing is whether you know the constitutional status or statutory status of these bodies. See, in 2013, which of the bodies don't find mention in constitution? Zonal councils don't find mention in constitution. These are statutory bodies, right? So NDC, Planning Commission, Zonal Council are not in constitution. 1995, which of the following are neither written in constitution nor have a law backing them? So zonal councils, these are written in the statute in this law, and interstate council written in the constitution. But 1 and 2, NDC and Governors Conference, are not written in the constitution or any law. So answer is 1 and 2. Fine. Now what is this NDC, National Development Council? Its first meeting was in 1952, last in 2012. Okay, it has a similar composition as NITI's Governing Council, but government is not assigning any work to it, so there have been no meetings since 2012. Okay, it is nothing but simply like your interstate council only. Okay, it has also similar work for greater coordination between center and states and between the states. Okay, but not much relevant because it is not mentioned or backed by any law. Niti Aayog. Niti Aayog is neither a constitutional body nor a statutory body. It was created by a Union Cabinet resolution in 2015. For prelims, you should know about its composition. The chairman is PM. Vice chairman is nominated by the PM. The CEO is appointed by the Appointment Committee of Cabinet. Okay. Members, some full-time, some part-time, some ex officio. Ex officio means that whoever is supposed the defense minister, that person will become the member of the Niti Aayog as well. Okay, such things. The governing council. There's a governing council in Niti Aayog. The composition is of this council has mainly two things. Some people, this governing council has some people from the Niti Aayog itself and some people from the states. Now whichever person is represented from the Niti Aayog is not important for prelims. What is important is that whether all the states are present in this council. So answer is yes, all states are present here. Okay, from Niti, the chairman, that is a PM, vice chairman, some members are present. CMs, all CMs are present here, be it of a state, be it of a UT, right? And the state, the UTs which don't have a CM, for example, Andaman Nicobar. So Andaman Nicobar's lieutenant governor is its member. Fine. These are some indexes released by Niti: SDG index, innovation index, export preparedness, data governance, school education quality, water management. Fine. How is Niti different from Planning Commission? Planning Commission used to allocate funds to the state. Niti does not do so. Planning Commission brought 5-year plans. Now India does not follow 5-year plans. Okay, Niti only brings 3-year, 7-year, 15-year plans. Some initiatives of Niti like SAT. SAT is to improve human capital. Human capital means like health, education, such things. Transformation of aspirational districts program. So aspirational districts was mainly to improve the India's HDI ranking. So India performs really poorly in the UNDP HDI rankings, right? So for that, Indian government thought that we should improve the Human Development Index of the backward most districts. If we improve the most backward districts, then automatically India's ranking will improve. So it was this program was initiated in 2018. The thing that UPSC has already asked in the mains examination is the convergence, collaboration and competition. What is the meaning of these three things? This UPSC has already asked. So what convergence is, that for aspirational districts, these backward districts, we are not going to launch new schemes, but we will make sure that the existing schemes of center and state, they are put to good use. Also, the officers of center and state, they will collaborate. Okay, there should be minimum friction between them, and there will be competition among the districts. If one district performed well in education, then other districts should learn and they should also try to become like that district. Okay, for each such district, a central government officer of the rank of additional secretary will be deputed. He will be responsible for one each such district. NDAP, a single web portal for accessing data across many ministries. Okay, Atal Innovation Mission, and a program and project management framework for infrastructure projects. You don't need to learn the details of these things, because I will just show you that what kind of questions UPSC asks about Niti Aayog. You just need to remember the name. You should be just able to identify whether NDAP is a project of Niti Aayog or not. Simple. For prelims, this much is sufficient. Okay, Niti Aayog is also responsible for Labor Economics Institution, okay, formed in 1962. Niti has a monitoring and evaluation office. It is responsible for India achieving its sustainable development goals, and it also responsible for maintaining NGO Darpan portal. So NGO Darpan portal earlier was a responsibility of Planning Commission. Now any NGO which wants funds from the government, it is compulsory that that NGO should register itself on this portal. Only then can it apply for government funds. Now see the previous year question. Niti 2015 question. Niti Aayog replaced what? It replaced Planning Commission. 2016 question. Financial Stability and Development Council is an organ of Niti Aayog. No. 2017 question. National Investment and Infra Fund is an organ of Niti Aayog. No. 2019. Atal Innovation Mission is from Niti Aayog. Yes. Okay. Contempt of court. Party A has a dispute with Party B. Both go to the court. Court says Party B is wrong. Party A wins the case. Party B says, I won't obey. Who are you to tell me that I am wrong? I will not obey you. I am independent. I have fundamental rights and such things. I won't obey you. I am not bound by you. Then what is the use of having courts? So courts should be empowered. That people will follow whatever court says. Right? So therefore, Constitution of India gives contempt powers to the court. It gives the power to the Supreme Court and High Court that if someone does not obey you, then you can initiate some proceedings against that person. Fine. That is the concept of contempt. Now it was in news because Prashant Bhushan, he tweeted something which the Supreme Court judges thought very offensive, and they said that you should be prosecuted for criminal contempt. Right? For prelims, what is important is that Constitution mentions and empowers Supreme Court and High Court with contempt powers, but it does not define. Constitution does not tell what is the meaning of contempt. The meaning of contempt is given by the 1971 Act, Contempt of Courts Act. Fine. Article 129 gives Supreme Court the powers that if someone does not obey Supreme Court can punish that person for its contempt. Article 215 similarly empowers High Court. Article 19 clause 2 says that the general public has freedom of speech and expression, but it is subject to a reasonable restriction, that is contempt of court. Fine. Now what about this act? This act defines contempt as civil and criminal. Court gave a order. This act says court gave a order and you say I won't obey you. That is civil contempt. That was done by, for example, Anil Ambani. Okay, Anil Ambani's firm, like it is famous for such things. It asked Ericsson to do some work for it, but refused to pay. He said कि मैं फकीर हूँ, मेरे पास कुछ पैसे नहीं है, I am a penniless person, I have nothing, I can give you the money. ठीक है, I took your services but I can't pay you. Supreme Court ruled that Reliance Anil Ambani must pay to Ericsson, else he will be put in jail. Okay, because Anil Ambani was given an order by Supreme Court, he refused to follow the order, so Supreme Court initiated the civil contempt proceedings against him. However, later on I think he paid it. Obviously he won't get to go to jail. Okay. Then criminal contempt. Court proceedings are going on and you create a ruckus in the court. You don't allow the court to function. Okay, you are creating some kind of obstruction that justice is not being able to be delivered. Then in that case, court can initiate criminal contempt proceedings against you. Or you say such things which scandalize the reputation of the court. That is also criminal contempt. Okay, so Prashant Bhushan was accused of criminal contempt and Anil Ambani of civil contempt. Now question can come in prelims about this 1971 Act. That what are the provisions of the 1971 Act? So first it defines, then does it empower High Court to punish for its own contempt? No. See, very important point here. Supreme Court, High Court and lower courts. If someone commits a contempt against Supreme Court itself can punish that person. If someone commits a contempt against High Court itself can act against that person. These provisions are given in the Constitution. See, Article 129, 215. However, if someone does some contempt against a lower court, then Constitution is silent there. Because Constitution is not empowering. Constitution does not empower the lower courts to punish for their contempt. No. However, this 1971 Act gives power to High Court to punish someone for contempt of lower court. Fine. So this is the thing. Then punishment 6 months jail or 2000 rupees fine. It is not applicable if offenses more than 1 year old. So when Prashant Bhushan gave these tweets, till 1 year, suppose till 1 year, no one did anything. Okay, no one initiated proceedings against him. After 1 year, you say that such and such person, Prashant Bhushan, made some tweets 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago, he should be prosecuted. No. In that case, if 1 year has elapsed, then contempt proceedings cannot be initiated against that person. Okay, this is written in the law. Section 13 of this law is very, very important. It clearly says that until and unless there is substantial interference in the process of justice, contempt cannot be done. That is not contempt, okay? Contempt is only when there is substantial interference in delivery of justice. Here in this case, Ericsson got justice. Ericsson got justice that when it has given some service, it should get the payment also. Justice was done. But Ambani refused. I won't obey. So he was an obstruction in the justice. You create a ruckus in the court. That's creating an obstruction. Okay. So that is substantial interference. Then it is contempt of court. When Prashant Bhushan tweeted this, can you file a case against him for contempt of court? No. Actually, it is the Attorney General whose permission is required. Okay. People generally write a letter to Attorney General or Solicitor General that such and such person has tweeted and he has done contempt of Supreme Court. So the court should initiate a case, the government should initiate a case, something like that. Okay. So consent of this person is required. Similarly, if there is a contempt of High Court, then permission of Advocate General is required. If there is a contempt of lower court, then lower court should approach the High Court that our contempt has been done, please do something. However, the Supreme Court and High Court can take suo motu cases also. They can themselves initiate. Here in this case, the Supreme Court itself said that we have read what Prashant Bhushan has tweeted against us and we ourselves are initiating contempt proceedings against him. Therefore, in such cases, the consent of Attorney General or Solicitor General is not required. Okay. So in short, just remember what is contempt: disobeying the court's order. You give an undertaking to the court that I will do something, but you do not do that thing. You are breaching your undertaking. You are interfering. You are scandalizing the court. What is not contempt? If you criticize the judgment, there is a judgment of Supreme Court and next day there is editorial in the newspaper criticizing the judgment. That is not contempt. You can criticize the judgment. You can also criticize the court. Not an issue. You can even criticize the judge. That is not an issue. All these things are either written in the law or said by the Supreme Court itself, that these things are not contempt of court. Okay. See, suppose you defame a judge. The judge can file a case against you for defamation. He can file a defamation suit against you. But that is not contempt of court. These are two different things. Right? If court gave some weird kind of judgment and you truthfully say, people don't know, court has given such a weird judgment. In that case, you cannot be prosecuted because you are just telling the truth. So whenever you are telling the truth, it's a valid defense. Okay, this thing is very obvious, but it was added to the 1971 Act through an amendment in the year 2006. If there are some charges against a High Court or Supreme Court judge, what is done? There are three options. First option is, if the allegation is against a High Court judge, the collegium of the Supreme Court will transfer that judge. For example, it happened in the case of Madras High Court. The Chief Justice there, Tahil Ramani, she was accused. There were some allegations against her of corruption type of things. Okay. So the Collegium of Supreme Court transferred her to Meghalaya High Court. Because Meghalaya High Court is a smaller court, so it's a kind of a disrepute or whatever you can think of like that. Okay, it's kind of a punishment. And Collegium is empowered to do so. However, she refused and she tendered her resignation. So that is one way. Okay. Another way is that there can be an in-house procedure. What happens here is that a complaint is made to the Chief Justice of India. The Chief Justice examines a complaint. If he thinks that yes, it's a serious complaint, then the Chief Justice will constitute a committee, a 3-member committee. Okay, this is a 3-member committee. If that committee finds that the judge is guilty, then that particular judge will be asked to resign himself. If he does not resign, then the Chief Justice may request the government that the Parliament should initiate the proceedings to remove that particular judge. Okay. For prelims, please remember the composition of the committee is very simple. I'll tell you just now. And also that in-house procedure is not mentioned in the Constitution or under any law. Okay. In-house procedure was adopted by the Supreme Court in 1997. It is not mentioned anywhere else. Members of the committee, quite simple. See, if the allegation is against a Supreme Court judge, so the committee will consist of 3 Supreme Court judges. Allegation is against a High Court Chief Justice. Committee will consist of 2 Chief Justices of other High Courts and Supreme Court judge. Allegation is against a High Court judge. In the committee there will be a High Court judge and 2 Chief Justices of other High Courts. Okay. So why are we reading this? Because Andhra CM complained to CJI that a Supreme Court judge, Justice N.V. Ramana, who is now going to be the Chief Justice of India, okay, he alleged some allegations, okay, put up some allegations against him. In 2019 also there were some allegations against Ranjan Gogoi, Chief Justice, he was that time. So in-house procedure was adopted. The third option is to remove the judge. Please note that Constitution does not use the word impeachment to remove the judges. The word used by Constitution is removal of Supreme Court or High Court judge. Okay. No judge of Supreme Court or High Court has been removed so far. In 1993, Justice V. Ramaswamy of Supreme Court became the first judge in India against whom proceedings were initiated in the Lok Sabha. However, it failed to get 2/3 majority. In 2011, Kolkata High Court Judge Justice Soumitra Sen, against him proceedings were initiated in Rajya Sabha and it successfully got 2/3 majority votes also. Now it was almost certain that Rajya Sabha will also do the same thing. Therefore, before Rajya Sabha could take it up, he resigned. One very important thing. This thing about special majority in both the houses, this is mentioned in the Constitution. However, the process is not mentioned in the Constitution. Okay. What are the grounds on which a High Court or Supreme Court judge can be removed? The grounds are proved misbehavior or incapacity. Constitution mentions these grounds, but it does not define them. Okay. Constitution mentions that there should be special majority in both houses, but Constitution does not tell the process. The process is told by Judges Inquiry Act 1968. The process is that 100 Lok Sabha MPs or 50 Rajya Sabha MPs should initiate a complaint to the Speaker or the Chairman of the Rajya Sabha. The Speaker or the Chairman has the power to reject the charges, or if that person finds substance in those allegations, he can form a committee. The committee will consist of Chief Justice of India or Supreme Court judge, 1 High Court Chief Justice, and a distinguished jurist. The committee may not find the person guilty. The case will stop there. But if the person is found guilty by the committee, then the matter will go to the Parliament. And if both the houses pass the motion with special majority, then the president will remove that judge. Okay, so this entire process is not mentioned in the constitution, it is mentioned in this act. But this special majority, this is mentioned in the constitution. 2019 question. Statement 1. To impeach a judge of Supreme Court, again, impeachment. UPSC has used the word impeachment, but it is not mentioned in the constitution. To impeach a judge of Supreme Court, Speaker cannot reject such an application. Speaker can. I told you, Speaker or Chairman can reject. Okay, so first statement is wrong. Second, Constitution defines incapacity or proven misbehavior. No, Constitution mentions this, but it does not define so. Third, process is mentioned in this act. Correct. And 2/3 majority is required in both houses. Correct. Lok Adalat. So if for every dispute, even for small disputes, if you go to courts, then courts will be overburdened and the delay will even increase. So there is a concept of Lok Adalat. Any kind of case, be it civil or criminal, it can be proceeded, it can be heard by the Lok Adalat. Okay, even if a court case is going on in, let us say, High Court or in any other court, a court case is going on, the parties can say कि so much pendency is there in the High Court, our date is not coming, so let's go to the Lok Adalat. So even if a case is pending before any court, Lok Adalat can be approached. Even if you have not initiated any case, a fresh case can also go to the Lok Adalat, right? However, non-compoundable cases cannot be heard by Lok Adalat. This is person A, this is person B. There is some kind of small dispute between two people. Okay, they go to the court and they find that court is giving date after date. Okay, so they say कि यार, let's settle the issue amongst ourselves only. You give me some money or whatever it is. Let's arrive at some compromise. Okay, so in some cases this compromise is allowed. Such cases are called as compoundable. Compoundable means compromise is allowed. Okay, but suppose person A did murder of person B. That is a non-compoundable offense. You can't compromise. A person has been killed. A person of Indian society killed another person of Indian society. It is a crime against society. Okay, this cannot be settled. This cannot be compromised. Such cases are non-compoundable cases. Okay, so non-compoundable cases cannot be heard by Lok Adalat. Also, divorce cases cannot be heard by Lok Adalat. Lok Adalat can hear matrimonial disputes, family disputes, many type of disputes. Lok Adalat can hear. Family disputes, yes, but not divorce cases. Fine. What was the inspiration behind bringing this concept of Lok Adalat? Inspiration were Constitution Articles 14 and 39A. So 14 says equality before law. If you have money, you can fight a case. Okay, fighting case in India is very expensive. A poor person cannot afford such a thing. Therefore, the concept of Lok Adalat. Also, the Article 39A introduced by 42nd Amendment Act. Okay, it says that the poor and weaker section should get free legal aid. Due to this only, due to Section 14 itself. Now, Lok Adalat, they are organized by Nalsa, Salsa, Dalsa. What are these? These are legal authorities. Okay, these are legal authorities empowered by the Legal Service Authority Act in 1987. Fine. The chairman of Lok Adalat is a judicial officer, but the members are lawyer and a social worker. Okay, whatever order Lok Adalat gives, it is final and binding. Once Lok Adalat gives a judgment, a order, that is final. Both parties have to obey it. They cannot go against it. They cannot appeal against it in any court. Okay, it's a very, very special feature of Lok Adalat. Prelims 2005 question. Which of these kind of disputes can be heard by Lok Adalat? All these three things. Pension case, motor accident case, case against mobile cellular companies. Okay, so all kind of case can be heard. These are not non-compoundable, very, very serious case, nothing like that. Okay, these are normal cases, can be heard by Lok Adalat. 2009 question. No appeal lies against decision of Lok Adalat. Absolutely correct. Okay. Matrimonial family disputes are not covered. Wrong. They are covered. It is a divorce cases which are not covered. Okay. Matrimonial and family disputes can be heard. So this is wrong because they can be heard. 2010 question. With reference to Lok Adalat. Matters pending before any court cannot be heard by Lok Adalat. Wrong. They can be heard. A matter is pending before any court, still you can go to Lok Adalat for that case. Okay. Lok Adalat cannot hear criminal cases. Wrong. They can hear criminal cases as well. Lok Adalat consists of judicial officers only. No. Lok Adalat has a social worker also. ठीक है ना, तो third is also wrong. NALSA. NALSA is at national level. At state level we have SALSA. At district level we have DALSA. Okay. The chairman of NALSA, what is important for prelims? For prelims, important thing is NALSA's work is to provide free legal aid and to organize Lok Adalat. These three are statutory bodies under the 1987 Act. Okay. NALSA is headed by Supreme Court judge. The Chief Justice of India is its patron-in-chief. It is not the chairman. The actual chairman is a Supreme Court judge. The chairman of SALSA is High Court Chief Justice of that state. And chairman of DALSA is district judge. 2013 question. Regarding NALSA. Its objective is to provide free and competent legal service to weaker section. Correct. It issues guidelines to SALSA. Correct. ठीक है, तो NALSA can issue guidelines to SALSA, SALSA to DALSA. Prelims 2020. Legal service authorities. We are talking about all three legal service authorities. They provide free legal service to which of the following? Person with annual income less than 1 lakh, transgender with annual income less than 2 lakh, OBC annual income 3 lakh, all senior citizen. See, this question is wrong. Why? Visit NALSA website. See, all these things, free legal aid, NALSA and everything, they are working under the 1987 Act. This Act, Legal Service Authorities Act. Okay. Section 12 of this Act, 1987 Act, clearly says that which all persons are eligible for free legal aid. Those are scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, women, child, disabled person, a industrial worker, a person who is in custody. Okay. Victim under Article 23. Article 23 victim like bonded laborer, human trafficking person, victim. Okay. Victim of any mass disaster like earthquake, cyclone, or there has been ethnic violence in the society. Okay. Or if suppose your case is going on in Supreme Court and your annual income is less than 5 lakh rupees per year. Okay, in that case also you will get free legal aid. However, if your case is going on in any high court or in any other court and you want legal aid from the government, okay, you cannot afford a lawyer. In that case, what is that income ceiling? That income ceiling is decided by the respective state government. Okay, these are the eligibility criteria. Now, from where did UPSC frame this question? The question framer actually saw the eligibility criteria for Delhi. This general, senior citizen, transgender, these limits, all these are framed from limits for Delhi, which we don't have to learn. Okay. Still, you could have attempted this question. How? If you knew this thing, okay, if you knew this thing, then you would have noticed that there is no mention of OBC, no mention of senior citizen. 3 and 4 are correct. 3 and 4 are correct. So only 1 and 2 is the correct option. Regarding helping the poor people get legal aid, 3 initiatives were launched. 3 very important initiatives were launched by Ministry of Law and Justice in 2017. One is Tele-Law Initiative. Here at SALSA, this is suppose SALSA, here some lawyers will be there, and at Common Service Center in the villages. Common Service Center, you can think just like a cyber cafe, okay, in the village where you can access computer, you can access the government services mainly. Okay, digital government services you can access here. So in the village there is common service center. So a poor person in a village can go to the common service center and it will be connected via internet to Salsa, where some lawyers will be there, and these lawyers will give some advice to that person. Okay, that is Telelaw initiative. Pro bono legal service. Some lawyers will give legal advice to the poor free of cost. Pro bono means without charging anything. Okay. Nyay Mitra scheme. The focus of this scheme is on cases which are older than 10 years. So common service center. See, when this computerization of India happened, okay, means this internet penetration increased, more and more computers came. Okay, so that time in the year 2006, Government of India launched a national e-governance plan to make India digital. For that, two main things were done. One, under this national e-governance plan, two things were done. One, the government itself will become digital and try to become paperless. Okay, nothing happens overnight. Slowly government will become paperless, digital. Government will try to provide maximum services through internet. Secondly, government is providing digital services, but maybe people don't have access to internet. Therefore, government in the year 2006 by MeitY opened common service centers. That is in villages. In villages there will be these cyber cafe type of things where computer will be there, internet will be there, and digital services of government will be accessible to the common man. ADR, alternate dispute resolution. Alternate to what? Alternate to the ordinary law courts. Okay, so some methods of ADR are negotiation, arbitration, conciliation, mediation. Negotiation is nothing but you have a dispute with someone, you both sit down together, talk to each other and find a solution. Fine. Arbitration. Arbitration is just like a court. It is just like a normal court, but it is not a court. Okay, the person, the arbitrator, okay, he is generally a retired judge with specialization in some particular topics. Arbitration is mostly required by companies. A company A entered into an agreement with company B on something. Now they both know that in future it is possible that some dispute may arise between us. In that case, we won't approach the court, because if we go to the court, it will take a lot of time, and in business, time is money. So we will rather approach a faster means of justice, that is arbitration. There are many arbitrators. They write an agreement itself that in case of any dispute, we will go to that particular arbitrator, and whatever that arbitrator says, it will be binding on us. Okay. Another method is conciliation. Here, what the person here says is not binding. Okay, he says that in my opinion, this should happen, but it is not binding on the either party. Third is mediation. Mediation is for where a person, a neutral person on whom both of these parties have some confidence, he will help these parties find a solution. Sometimes the parties are not on talking terms, but they trust this middleman. So this middleman will facilitate dialogue between them. That is mediation. In 1996, India brought this act, Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996. In the last 5 years, it has been amended 3 times. Okay, so I don't personally think that these amendments are required for your prelims examination. Still, out of the many amendments, I have narrowed down to few handful of amendments which in extreme case maybe UPSC can ask if it wants to ask a difficult question. The 2015 amendment imposed a time limit of 12 months extendable by another 6 months for the arbitrator to give an award. In 2019, we removed this limit for international arbitration commercial disputes. Also, we allowed arbitrators to be appointed by arbitral institution instead of the Supreme Court, High Court. See, what used to happen is when two parties write in the agreement that we will go to this arbitrator, okay, sometimes maybe that this arbitrator is not available, not there, or it could be the case that such in the agreement they did not write that to which arbitrator we will go. Okay, so when they say that suppose to that they have not written to which arbitrator we will go, the parties used to approach Supreme Court or High Court कि sir you are courts, you are neutral, so please you tell us to which arbitrator we should go. Okay, that work was done by, that recommendation work was done by Supreme Court, High Court. Now through this amendment we said that Supreme Court or High Court will rather say, designate that there is arbitral institution. Supreme Court or High Court will say there is some arbitral institution, you two parties should go to this arbitral institution. This arbitral institution will tell you to which arbitrator you should go. ठीक है, so that is a process. The third amendment was it provided for setting up of Arbitration Council of India. So who can be an arbitrator in India? Can you, me, anyone can become an arbitrator? No, there has to be some criteria, na? Then so you have to register yourself with someone, you have to get a certificate. Okay, there has to be some grading of arbitrators. That all work will be done by the Arbitration Council of India. Its chairman will be a judge of Supreme Court or High Court Chief Justice or High Court judge or an eminent person. Okay, the chairman will be appointed by the central government after consulting Chief Justice of India. Members वगैरह not important for prelims, you can ignore these things. Fine. Simple question can come on. What is Singapore Convention on Mediation? The official name is United Nations Convention on International Settlement Agreements resulting from mediation. Okay, it is the first UN treaty to be named after Singapore. It recently came into force in September 2020. India has already signed it. So simply UPSC will ask the question that Singapore Convention on Mediation, has India signed it? Yes. Is it in force? Yes, it is in force. Okay. Details are not important. Details are simply, I'm just telling you very briefly. These are different countries. Okay. A company from country A is working in country B in India, suppose. Okay. Now some dispute arises here. Now how will that dispute be resolved? There's a proper method for this. Okay. Usually such disputes go on for many years. Government's aim is to bring down the time, okay, to make sure that these disputes get resolved in the fastest way, so that foreign companies have confidence to work in India, right? So with this international agreement, this process, when foreign companies investing in your country, such process of arbitration and everything will become faster. Okay, that is the main aim of this. The exact process is not important for prelims. A small clarification for class 2 of polity. On page number 14, I had given a list of ministries or list of parliamentary committees where minister cannot be a part of them. Okay, a very important parliamentary committee which I missed to write in that list is Committee on Public Undertakings. Please add it there. Okay. Also, I'm just telling you that there I had given a table about 3 financial committees: Committee on Public Account, Committee on Estimate, and Committee on Public Undertakings. ठीक है ना? So all these 3 finance committees, minister cannot be a part of any of these financial committees. This you have to remember. Okay, so that's it for this class. ये क्लास इंग्लिश में थी, हिंदी वाली क्लास भी हमारे यूट्यूब चैनल पे अवेलेबल है, एंड नेक्स्ट क्लास विल बी अपलोडेड विद इन 3-4 days. Thank you very much.